All right. Welcome back to the last talk of day one of our 5th annual Taoist conference. Our next speaker is a really, really cool person in our community, in our Taoist community, our Chinese medicine community, licensed acupuncturist and practitioner of Chinese medicine since 1989. She taught herself to read medical Chinese and texts on divination, day selection, and feng shui shortly after becoming licensed. She's translated 6 ancient medical books, including the miscellaneous records of a female doctor by Tan Yun Xian. I can recommend her book on moxibustion treatment. It's one of the most popular books that people pick up in my clinic. And I also actually check in with it quite a bit because it's, and I'm sure many of these other books as well, are incredible resources. They're jam-packed with information and you're citing sources throughout not only space, but also time, which is really awesome. Even her YouTube has incredible resources. That's one thing that we could put in here on Chinese medicine and also the Bagua, because we mentioned the Bagua quite a few times here. There's a great little video, the 8 trigrams and their correspondences, that lives on Lorraine Wilcox's page, that if you are interested more and you say, I'm not familiar with this, so some of that talk went over my head, you can go and check some things out and fill in some gaps for yourself if you have some YouTube time available to you. Her next publication will be the 19th century medical cases from the Flower Charm Studio by Gu Dehua. Her talk today is something that will really tie our conference together and bring some of these concepts back down to earth. Did ancient doctors actually divine? We know that they exist in a time where divination was certainly a huge part of daily life, but they didn't always write about it so readily, especially in some of these big medical textbooks that are translated and that we know well as Chinese medicine practitioners. So her talk will explore scholar physicians' writing to examine the question, did these ancient doctors divine? And so Lorraine Wilcox, why don't you take it away?
Thank you. Let's see, I'm sharing screen. It should be up now. Let's do a slideshow. Thank you so much. That's a really nice intro. I appreciate it. I appreciate that you asked me here, and let me get this thing going. I did put the PDF of this in chat. If someone came in late, maybe at the end I'll put it up again, or maybe somebody else can do that. Why? I'm used to doing, oh, there, now I see. Okay. Excuse me. So here we go. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm going to talk about, did doctors divine? And here's the quandary. When I first started studying Chinese medicine, started studying Chinese language, I had already graduated from acupuncture school, and I was studying with a teacher for feng shui and astrology and stuff like that. Sorry, I'm a bit phlegmy. So, anyway, I had been studying all this. So once I started learning Chinese, I was really interested to find out, like, I heard the doctors used like I Ching, and how did they divine, and what kind of questions did they ask, and did they have special techniques? And so I've spent like 30 years looking through Chinese medicine texts in Chinese, going back as far as the Han Dynasty and forward to the Qing Dynasty. And what really surprised and shocked me, and what I didn't want to find, was that the doctors don't write about doing medical divination. So does that mean they didn't do it? No, it just means that they didn't write about it. So let's kind of explore this question. First off, I think maybe we need a definition or two. I didn't hear everything that went before in this conference, so I don't know if I'm repeating some stuff, but Shi Zhuan, which is, one of the commentaries on I Ching that's attributed to Confucius, says that divination is to know the future. That's what it's about. So it seems to me obvious that if a doctor had a difficult case, why wouldn't he, ask about the diagnosis and the prognosis and so forth? And so this is what I'm looking for. Another definition, there's a term xuan shui, which is the study of the mysterious or profound. It's often translated as metaphysics. And so there's like this big category of profound, mysterious stuff, and divination is one part of it. And the characters that are generally used for divination, either separately or together, are this Jan and this Bu. And then we saw in the previous talk the word Gua, but that's specific for I Ching divination, where these are general terms for, any various types of divination. So I'm talking about, did doctors use methods to predict the future? And, divination in general is considered using signs or omens, using tools such as coins or stocks or tortoise shells, and also using calendar systems. Well, they certainly use calendar systems, but not necessarily for divination. So anyway, there's something you come across sometimes that is called the five skills or the five arts. And one thing I found when I was researching this is actually a modern grouping. A book in 1973, first, a Japanese book, first said these are these five things. So all of these things are very ancient, but they weren't called the five skills until the 20th century. And note that medicine is one of them and divination is another of the five skills. One of the things that I thought about was like, when I was newer at this, I thought, oh, I need to learn all of these to be complete. But at this point, I'm an old lady now. I've got like 30 years of experience. And I've realized that I don't really want to be a jack of all trades, master of none. I want to, do one or two of these things well, deeply, profoundly, rather than have a shallow understanding of all of them. And so I think, this is still some preliminary stuff before we go into did ancient doctors divine, but anyway, so in medical books, and I do want to be very clear that I'm using the general canon of medicine. There's a site called Jicheng, which has like literally hundreds, like probably has 1,000 Chinese medical books, that you can access and search, and you can search the whole web page. And so, I've searched the whole webpage for the various terms that mean divination, and it comes up like 300 times, but not one of them in this vast database of texts, not one of them is about a doctor throwing the coins for the I Ching in order to diagnose their patient, not once. So I'll be talking about that. I'll be talking about what I found. But in any case, these medical books, there's medical day selection. In other words, some days are really good for practicing medicine or, having a treatment. Some days are not good for it. Some days you don't want to allow any blood to appear, so you wouldn't use bleeding therapy. There are ways of calculating good and bad days for various activities, including medical activities. Besides that, calendar is used in certain styles of point selection, where you calculate which point is open at this particular time on this particular day. There are methods that someone named Paul Unschel calls predictive epidemiology, where you can predict the weather patterns for each year based on calendar. And there's also a thing in a few chapters of Ling Shu called the 8 winds, which is also a prediction for the year as a whole. And so the first two are not predictions, they're selecting a day or selecting a point. They use a calendar, but they're not predictions. The last two are predictions, but they're like kind of for the whole environment. They're not for any individual. They're not based on birth information, and the first three are only calendar. That's all you need to calculate them. The last one uses calendar plus some omens. It's like, what direction is the wind blowing from on the first day of spring or on the winter solstice? And then that helps you to make the prediction. But again, these are not like a doctor trying to diagnose a patient by making a divination. Some non-calendar stuff that ancient doctors used, not always, like not in every case, not all the time, but sometimes. Some of them used incantations and talismans. There's a talisman in Zhenzhou Dacheng, a very famous acupuncture book. There like a couple volumes of incantations in Sun Tzu Miao's Zhenjin Yifang. So you come across this in the old books. So to me, that Xuan Shui, that's kind of quote metaphysics. I don't like the word metaphysics for Chinese stuff, but yeah. There's also, some talk of, ghosts or bad spirits could possess a person. And so there are some exorcisms mentioned in some of the old books, which can include incantations and talismans. There's dream interpretation, although in medicine, it's most often just based on 5-element theory, and it's not really predictive. It's more diagnostic. Like, if the person dreams of fires raging, then it's fire element, it's perhaps the heart. And then a trigram theory, and that was the thing I was most excited, most looking for. I thought, oh, since medicine is based on I Ching, then the doctors are going to be doing predictions all the time. But no, what it is that they're going to say this disease is like when you have fire over water. So fire rises up and water runs downward, and they don't interact with each other. And that's a way of explaining the theory of a disease, but it's not, they did not use the I Ching in predictions, or at least they didn't write about it. So I think, all of the things on the last slide and this slide are Xuan Shui, they're the study of the mysterious or profound, but I don't really consider this divination. You may vary, it depends on your, point of view. And finally, this is my introductory part, this term Jan, which means to divine, is sometimes used kind of colloquially, just like you might say, I'm trying to divine the stock market or something like that, because you want to know when to sell or when to buy, but you're not literally doing a divination. People use that word colloquially. And so here's an example of that. I found, a number of examples like this where Dr. Wu Kun says that people who are sorrowful all the time often have short pulses. And you can predict that they'll have a qi type disease, not a blood disease or, not something else. So here, this isn't really meaning like predict in any mysterious way. It's just like, oh, if you understand they have sorrow and they have a certain type of pulse, that means it's a qi problem. So that's my little introduction. I'm gonna move on to some quotes from some of the old books that I found, especially doing the research. Some of this I had earlier, but some of this when I was researching for this talk came up. And so we're going to see a doctor who's asking himself the question, well, he wasn't a doctor yet, and he's asking himself a question, should I become a doctor or should I practice divination? And, what I came to find is that basically these scholar physicians considered divination and medicine two different careers, not, something you practice together, but it's like a choice. Now, I am talking about the, standard corpus of Chinese medicine, and I have not spent time in the Taoist canon. So there may be, doctors so in the standard canon of Chinese medicine, plenty of doctors, had strong Taoist tendencies. But there are also plenty of Confucian doctors. But I don't know about somebody whose writings don't appear in the standard writings of Chinese medicine. Anyway, so the book information is up above, but here is this guy telling his origin story of becoming a doctor. He says, a scholar who's born into a minor branch of the family can't set his mind on becoming a high official because he doesn't have the connections, nor can he live a life of seclusion and leisure because he doesn't have the money to just not work. If he can conceal himself to benefit others, or if he can pass for a commoner and promote the Tao, over time he can gain recognition through his skills. Okay, so he's basically saying, he needs some hands-on skills. This word "ji" is like technique or hands-on skills. Whereas like if you were the highest level of scholar, you just use your brush and write, and your writings would be what you produce. But this is talking about hands-on skills, which the highest level of scholar would look down upon. So he's saying, if you can learn some stuff and help the people, you can start to become recognized. He points out that in certain old history books, there were biographies of diviners who did calculation arts of an early Han Dynasty doctor, and he uses the term fangji. It's the same ji as skills, which mean people who practice these technical skills. So he's saying, I can't be a high official. I can't just lie around and do whatever I feel like. I have to make some money, but I still want some recognition. And if I can develop my skills, maybe history books will include a chapter about me later. He continues that, so, the Imperial Library of the Han Dynasty, this is the guy who collected it. Okay, so when this Mr. Liu collected the Imperial Library, he gathered divination text and also medical texts of formulas, like herbal formulas. So again, he's saying, look, diviners and medicine are both have been valued as careers. He says one of them, obviously divination, decides uncertainty through omens, but the other saves lives in danger. So he asks himself the question, should I study medicine or should I study divination? I chose medicine, he said. So to me, part of what this is saying is like it's a choice. You can't, or you weren't expected to do both and be good in both. They're different branches to go down. It seems he respected divination, but he still chose medicine. Some doctors thought divination was inferior to medicine, but still thought it was a useful thing for others to practice. So here's another guy who says in ancient times, if you couldn't work in the imperial court, if you couldn't work in the palace, you needed to either practice medicine or divination. And therefore, one guy, a Mr. Yan, retired from the court to practice divination, while another guy, Mr. Han, retired to practice medicine. However, divination predicts good and bad luck. Medicine has cause and effect. In other words, like when you practice medicine, you do something and you see the effect pretty clearly. In divination, you don't always know what happens or if it's actually going to happen. It's more nebulous. So he said, if you're not proficient in medicine, you better do divination instead. Because, if you give the wrong cause, you'll get a bad effect, is what I believe he's saying. So these were two famous guys in the history book. This doctor is very well known, Qing Dynasty doctor, Xu Dachuan. And he says, among the various skills, and this time for skill, he uses the term Xiao Dao, a small Dao, which means like a skill, but it's not like understanding the vastness of the universe. Okay, so among these various skills, medicine and divination are the only ones that closely correspond to people's daily lives. You know, people want to know what's going on, so they go to a diviner, and people are sick, so they go to a doctor. So this is really everyday stuff for people in general. Divination is more unreliable, but sometimes it is reliable. And medicine is more reliable, but sometimes it doesn't work. He says that the way of divination, the Tao of divination, involves arranging bamboo slips to find omens, but there's no actual evidence. Yet people really want to figure out what's happening, what's changing, what's going on in the events and things in their life. This is pretty unreliable, he says. However, when divination is effective, it's like the response of a drum to a drumstick. You know, the instant you hit a drum, it makes a sound. The response is instant. So sometimes he's saying, like, wow, divination is amazing. Sometimes, but a lot of the times, not so much. When it's ineffective, it's as incompatible as ice and fire. And even uneducated people can tell how skillful or how clumsy the diviner is. On the other hand, the Tao of medicine differentiates symptoms and signs and determines formulas. And that's something that you can definitely verify. It's like tangible, it's like more solid, more real, he's saying. So, um, other doctors were like totally hostile. You know, I don't know if you know, but a lot of diviners and feng shui practitioners and so forth had a reputation for being cheats. And some of them were, and some doctors are cheats, you know, but there was kind of like an idea that you can't live with them and you can't live without them. It's like hard to really trust them because, you know, greedy people are going to do scams. So let's see what it says here. Here's another book. You can see the information and the date up there. It's talking about a woman who's pregnant, and he says these people should not seek divination or fortune telling as it's getting close to their time to give birth. Listening to those opportunistic shamans deceive and intimidate turns good fortune into bad. These shamans are going to tell the pregnant women what prayers they should offer to the gods, which Buddhas they should, you know, make offerings to. They cause her to worry, doubt, and fear, and to dream of danger. Her true chi will become constrained, and so she can't relax. And when it's time to deliver, even if the delivery should have been easy, she's so worked up. She, you know, becomes so tense and scared. She makes it that way. You know, my feng shui teacher used to talk about like the crooked diviners or feng shui people would say, oh, this horrible thing is going to happen, but if you buy this piece of jade from me, then that will protect you from it. And then they'd charge a really high amount of money for, so it's kind of like extortion. um and you know, they're good feng shui practitioners. There definitely are, I'm not against them, but you know, it's a thing where you can easily fool people and scare them. So, um, let's see, I think this is still from the same thing, but a different passage in the same book. Practitioners of divination, feng shui, astrology, and face reading, as well as he uses a term for female shaman and another term for male shaman, all cheat foolish people to make a living. Educated people are deluded by them. This frequently results in misfortune, not just childbirth, but like in other areas too. So you can see this person is really hostile. Here's another person. When somebody gets sick, they often go to a diviner and ask, you know, for the prognosis and, you know, is it going to turn out okay or not? At the same time, they often ask the diviner which direction to go in to find a doctor. You know, so there's this thing like, you know, the prediction can say going to the north is beneficial, going to the southeast is bad, or, you know, whatever. So that's a thing people would ask is like, what direction should I look for a good doctor in? And also, they would ask the diviner which surname of the doctor they should go to. Do I want to go to Dr. Zhang or Dr. Li or Dr. you know, whoever? And that was a thing that could be predicted, you know, at least, you know, if you believe this. Of course, it won't work in the West because we don't have those surnames. But anyway, so these people are asking the diviner to refer them to a doctor because they're ignorant. They don't know who's good or bad. They don't have options. So they ask the diviner. But how could they know that some doctors and diviners conspire with each other? Doctors seek referral from the diviners, so they promise to give the doctor a kickback. If you send for every patient you send me, I'll give you so much money back. So the diviners just send the patient to the doctor who will pay them back and don't really tell them the truth about what the predictions might say. The diviner is greedy for profit and pretends that the spirits show the way. Misled by their recommendations, it can frequently cost the patient their life. So don't be that way. Don't do that. Okay, then I'm moving on to some other. So some doctors may not have liked to divine because they associate it with cheating. That may be a reason. Some doctors may not divine because they think it's a different career path. I'll be summarizing this more at the end. So, you know, then there's the question about the I Ching and medicine. There's some famous statements like, if you don't know I, as in I Ching, if you don't know I, you're not qualified to be a doctor, is a famous statement that is attributed to Sun Simiao, although he didn't exactly say that. Anyway, so I became so interested in how is change theory used in divination. Change theory means the theories of the I Ching, because I means change. So, you know, they may not be doing divination, but they're using I Ching theory within the way they understand, you know, diagnose, treat, you know, and so forth. And there's a quote that actually I first heard it from my feng shui shifu. And basically, there's this saying in Chinese that someone who's good at I doesn't need to divine. And so you could translate this somebody who's good at I Ching, but what I believe it really means is somebody who's good at change theory, the theories of the I Ching. It's not that they're good at the book and they have the whole book memorized, because what good is a book that's memorized if you don't know how to apply it? Okay, so let's talk about this. If you're good at change theory, you don't need to divine. If you are good at this theory, you understand the ebb and flow of the universe. You understand how things change and mutate and, you know, either in the tidal hexagram way that we saw with the previous speaker, or even, you know, mutations and changes can be abrupt because, you know, if you throw the coins and then they're random changing lines, one, you know, hexagram can transform into any other hexagram. So, you know, some changes are just very predictable and cyclical, and other changes are, you know, more catastrophic and random. But if you understand change theory, then you already understand how these changes and transformations work. So you don't need to ask the question. I almost feel like, why should I bother the I Ching if it's, like sometimes, like when I first started playing with like throwing a hexagram, I would ask about every little thing. And at some point I pictured, the E saying, oh, leave me alone, give it a rest, think for yourself. So yeah, I mean, in times of great difficulty, I think it can be amazing, but like, I'm not going to run my whole life asking every minor detail to the I Ching because like hopefully I know how to live and walk through this world, right? Here's a Dr. Sun Kuei who says somebody who sees medicine as a xiao dao, a small dao, just a skill, or sees changes through divination with yarrow stalks isn't doesn't have a very good level of understanding. They have the same level of insight as someone who measures the ocean with a gourd dipper. That's like a saying. It's like, how could you measure something so vast with something so small? Or they have the same level of insight as somebody who sees a leopard through a tube, and the rest of that saying is then they think it only has one spot because through the tube you only see one spot. You don't see all the spots on the leopard. How is that person at a high enough level to speak of them? So he's saying medicine is a profound practice. It's not just a skill. Medicine can be a profound practice that you can cultivate your understanding of the big taiji of heaven and earth. um, it's not just a skill. Like, we're not just here to fix people's back pain. Of course, it's miraculous to fix somebody's back pain, but there's still more we can achieve through in our understanding, in our personal cultivation through medicine. And, if all you're doing with change, I Ching is just asking questions and pestering it every 5 minutes, that's at a very high level. What you really need to do is understand the mechanisms of change and how they ebb and flow through the universe and around you. And so this same guy that was on the previous page, Sunny Kuei, says that somebody who's deeply immersed in change theory, and again, he just says changes, but change theory, will be good in medicine. And somebody who's proficient in medicine will get there through understanding change theory. And the idea is that, like, if you do understand change theory, you just understand how the universe works. So you don't need to, like, use divine divination in order to get the answers. When you get to this level, your understanding is adequate for the task that's in front of you. There's another saying in Chinese that if there's no uncertainty, don't divine. um and basically, yeah, if you already know what the answer is, why divine? And then as a doctor, and I know not all of you are doctors, but I think this can also apply to other areas where you have skills. As a doctor, if my diagnosis skills are adequate, if I can read the pulse, if I've developed my pulse diagnosis enough and the other aspects of diagnosis, then I won't have uncertainty. I'll know. So I don't need to divine. And so if I'm really a skilled doctor, I don't need to divine. The answer is under my fingertips in their pulse or looking at their face or their tongue. And also for treatment, if I've studied herbs and acupuncture adequately, then once I have an adequate diagnosis, I should be able to come up with a good treatment. In other words, medicine is based on skills. And remember the other doctors saying how unreliable divination is, whereas medicine is more reliable. So I should use the reliable tools over the unreliable tools. In a way, we could say that if a doctor uses divination to ask the diagnosis or treatment of a patient, that means their diagnostic skills are not good enough to get that information, because if they were, they wouldn't need to divine. And so a doctor divining could be seen by others or even by oneself as a failure in their skill. And what doctor is going to admit that in a book when they're writing about it? So back to this guy Sun Yikui, he wrote a whole essay about I Ching and medicine, and this is in a different place. This is a case study, and I don't have the whole case study here because it's irrelevant, but he said something to the man of the house, and the man of the house said, okay, I'm gonna divine, or get a divination tomorrow to see what that says. And Sun Yikui says, divination is used to settle uncertainty. If there's no uncertainty, why would you bother divining? And so the guy told his wife, and she apparently knew Sun Yikui better. And she said, Dr. Sun does not mislead people. His insight is often extraordinary. We should obey his orders. So, you can see how Sun Yikui is saying, I don't have any uncertainty, so there's no need to divine. He's looking down, he's looking at divination as kind of a questioning of his skills rather than having confidence in them. Here's another case. This is from Zhenzhou Dachang, which is a really famous Ming Dynasty book on acupuncture and Mark Sebastian. The author is Yang Jizhou, who was an imperial physician, and this does have divination in this case, but it's not Yang Jizhou divining. It's not Dr. Yang divining. So in 1580, he's saying, in 1580, Dr. Yang passed through someplace and saw the district magistrate, whose name was Huang. And apparently they knew each other from the past. And Magistrate Huang said his third son had some kind of facial problem for several years and hadn't gotten better. So is it facial paralysis? Is it trigeminal neuralgia? Is it a skin problem? I don't know. It doesn't say. But, Magistrate Huang was quite worried about this condition. And so the day before, Yang Jizhou came and knocked on Magistrate Huang's door and said, hey, old friend, long time no see. The day before that, Magistrate Huang had lit incense and divined using something that's called spirit chess. And I'll tell you what the divination said, but first, I didn't really know about spirit chess before, but there's apparently a book that has 125 entries in it, and somehow you use 12 chess pieces that tell you which entry to look at. And this book you can find in Chinese. And so they give the poem. This is a common thing in Chinese divination, is you do something and then you come up with a poem, which is very mystical and hard to understand, but you try to apply it to your situation. And so the poem is the 10th here. And so here's what it says, which is very hard to translate because it's very dreamlike, mystical images that, it's non-specific for a reason so that you can apply it to all kinds of stuff. So the divination said, waiting for a long, long time in the dust and dirt, which means down here in this earthly life. Dark window, solitude, but there is someone who knows, fated to find a treasured sword, people regarding each other. Benefit follows fame and achievement, both for a time. I'm not sure about this translation, but, it's the best I could do. So here, Magistrate Huang says an interpreter explained it, and all of these things in italics are referring back to words in that poem. Treasure is something valued. Sword is something sharp. Your son can recover when you meet a special person, a valued person. That's what the interpreter said. And so that was yesterday when Huang didn't know Yang Jizhou was coming. But today, Huang and Yang Jizhou, the author, they're regarding each other. I know you're skilled in acupuncture, which is sword-like, metal, sharp, and so forth. The disease recovery has a time. The word time, like time period, was in the last part of that poem. So Yang Jizhou needled his son on certain points and applied moxa and slowly and gently treated him, and the son recovered. Okay, so here you can see, yeah, this is a divination in a medical case, but it's not the doctor divining, it's the patient or the patient's father trying to figure out what's up and then applying the divination to the arrival of this famous doctor and old friend. There's another story that's very much like this in the book that's listed up here, where a patient looked for a divination because he was sick. So he went to a temple and got a divination. And in that temple, whatever text they had, he got number 16. There's often you have a cup of like bamboo sticks, and each stick has a number on it, and you shake the cup until one stick starts, poking out, and his stick said 16. And so 16 indicated that his body was strong and that he could live. It wasn't fatal as long as he could find proper treatment and a good doctor. So he recovered, but then he got ill again with the exact same thing. And so he went back to the same temple and he divined again, and he received this same exact line, number 16. So eventually, this is not a translation, this is me summarizing the story. Eventually, he found the author of this book, who was a doctor, and the author treated him and he recovered. So again, this isn't giving a diagnosis or a treatment. The divination is not done by the doctor, but the doctor doesn't mind telling you, oh, my patients, divined, and the divination sent them towards me, because that kind of makes them feel like their meeting was fated and like that they were specially favored by the spirits or whoever is in charge of these divinations. So that's the kind of thing you find in medical texts. Um, Finally, I think this is the last couple of things, a couple of cases where a doctor used a shaman, but actually they didn't use the shaman the way, in an honest way. Okay. So here's a story by Wang Ji, but actually the case is attributed to an earlier Dr. Han. A girl and a mother loved each other, and then she got married and moved, to her husband's house, and then her mother died, and the girl was so sad and mourned. She was so sad that she became ill from longing for her mother. Her body and mind became depleted. She was listless and tired. All she wanted to do was sleep. She had vexation and oppression of her chest and diaphragm region, and every day she was more weak and more tired. They got her medicine, but nothing helped. So they called this Dr. Han in, and he said, I think, to the family, this disease is due to longing. This character in Chinese medicine is usually translated as thought, but it also means longing. And she's not just thinking about her mother, she's longing for her mother. This word can mean both things. Anyway, his wife had complete faith, the sick woman had complete faith in a female shaman. This shaman would channel spirits who would come down into her and would talk about what's happening. So Han told the husband to bribe the shaman, and then the husband coaxed coached the shaman. So he told the shaman, this is what you need to say. Channel my wife's mother channel my mother-in-law and say, in a past life, we were enemies, but you entrusted your life to me in this life so that you could harm me. That was your way of getting back to me. Because of this, your life overcame mine. I died because of you, my daughter. Now, in the yin realm, I want to take revenge on you. Your illness is my doing. When I was alive, we were mother and child, but now that I'm dead, I am your enemy. So the husband went back home after he had bribed the shaman, and he teased his wife. There are other places that tell the same story. He said to her, "You seem to like your dead mother more than you like living people who are right in front of you." He said, "I'm going to go out. Why don't you invite the shaman in to divine about your condition?" So the wife invited the diviner who came, and she said all that about, like, I used to be your mother, but now I'm your enemy. The wife became enraged. She said, I'm sick because of my own mother. She has harmed me. So why should I keep longing for her? And then she stopped longing for her mother and she got better. Yeah, so the shaman was obviously dishonest in this case. And here's another. This is like the last story. Okay. So somebody heard that his father had been murdered by bandits. He felt deep sorrow and cried for his father. And when he stopped crying, he felt pain in his heart. And the pain got worse day by day. And after more than a month, he developed a lump in his chest that was shaped like an overturned cup, whatever. The pain was intense and wouldn't stop. And they tried medicine, but medicine didn't work. Someone suggested acupuncture and moxa, but the patient hated it. And so they sent for Zhang Zihe, the author of this, who calls himself Dairen. Okay, so when Zhang Zihe arrived, there happened to be a shaman there. His family was desperate, so they not only were calling doctors, they were calling shaman. And so Zhang Dairen mimicked the shaman, mixing in outlandish words, like he's just standing behind the shaman and gesturing and saying crazy stuff and mimicking the shaman. And the patient couldn't help himself and started laughing so hard that he had to turn away. And so after a couple of days, the lump below his heart disappeared. So you can see, like, this shaman probably hates Zhang Dairen, but anyway, it's kind of a amusing story if you ask me. So, in summary, why didn't doctors write about medical divination? And again, I'm talking about scholar physicians who wrote these books that have been collected into, encyclopedias of medicine and so forth. One, divination was a separate career from medicine because you want to be good in what you do, and you can't necessarily, you don't have enough lifetime to be good in both, maybe. Having a doctor was higher status than being a diviner, and many people did believe diviners were cheaters. Not just doctors, but educated people especially. Some of them believed that diviners were cheaters. There really were good ones, but there were also cheaters. Third, if you're good at diagnosis, if there's no uncertainty, there's no need to divine. So again, admitting that you don't have a clear diagnosis and wanting to divine is like saying, I'm not a good enough doctor. And also, medicine is more tangible. One of the doctors talked about that, it's cause and effect, and you can see results. Whereas, you can actually do good in the world, not just tell somebody what's happening. So I am not saying I agree with all of this. I'm just saying what I found. My conclusion is that if you want to play with medical divination, why not? It exists, but usually it's, non-doctors who are doing medical divination. But even if you're a doctor, why not play with it? But ultimately, the more important thing is to develop your diagnostic skills, your medical skills, so you don't need to divine. you know, but I still, I play with divination. I'm not anti-divination. So that's my little talk. And I want to thank all of you for being here. And I want to thank everybody who put this conference together and invited me. And I'm going to stop sharing. It won't stop. There it goes. Hi.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. That's I really love the citing the sources. You have these like direct voices from some of these doctors, and we can see some of the same attitudes that they were having might be similar to a doctor of today, in terms of trusting more the physical world than the metaphysical world. So I very much appreciate that. If anybody has any questions, we can put it in the chat here. Let's see.
Did I put the handout up again in case somebody came in later? I don't see any questions.
Yeah, not yet. I think it's really interesting the way that, especially from the more imperial physician side, obviously they work out of two different groups of people. And so just like any group of people, we have our belief systems and our culture. And so of course you're gonna feel that if you've been through all this studying to diagnostic training, you're gonna might feel that, hey, that's what I'm gonna go with. I'm highly trained. I'm getting these cases right. And I certainly know as an acupuncturist, sometimes we get to a point where we get pretty confident in our diagnosis. And we're like, yep, that's what's happening. If you just change this, you would heal. And yeah, occasionally we get a curveball here and there, but I could see that if these are classically trained folks, of course, they're going to be very confident in what they're doing.
And a bit snobby.
Yeah, perhaps a bit snobby. Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a status aspect to being that sort of doctor. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here. Truly. And yeah, if you have anything to add, this is the wrap up for today. So um, we are going to start back up at 9 Eastern tomorrow morning. And tomorrow morning, we have a jam-packed schedule as well. I think we have another 4 presenters. And I can't wait to see you all back tomorrow. We have the people on the website. I can pull it up right here to make sure that we know. But Joshua, do you want to say anything while we're...
Um, oh, okay, thank you. All the speakers are very amazing. They have all the different, how to say, the opinion, different, bring a lot of things up. And everyone have either the past, in the history, always, the people, all, either the famous people, they always have their strong opinion. I don't want to use the with discriminated, what's it called? Discriminated, like yes, it's I'm Chinese. It's very very common. Either the Buddhist with the Daoist they have the huge problem, and either the Daoist have the two school also have the problem too, like Quanzhen and Zhengyi the school. Okay, you're not good. You're not good. So everything is great, because of the opinion. Everybody have their own opinion. It's great. For me, after the heading, it have a lot of different method. So how to say, you can use herbal and acupuncture, either that, Taoism, and either how to say, use the tuina, something like massage, like a Chinese massage, also can healing. Some people use the feng shui, and some people. Actually, in the Han Dynasty, is the sexual technique is very, very, very popular, very, very common. Also, they use it as a healing tool. So they all have the opinion. I'll have. I believe. For me, in my opinion, I believe. They all have where they have that, what people accept means have some like a good effect. So. This is great. It's a lot of healing stuff. And thank you, everyone here. So maybe like we can talk about something tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Shofu. I think it's interesting to see these different opinions. And tomorrow, Shofu is as somebody who comes from the Taoist side of knowing divination perhaps before knowing medicine, it could be a completely different sort of conversation, because again, we're talking about two historical groups of people. These imperial physicians who have their culture, and then of course more of like the Taoist divinatory path has their own culture, and we have to kind of acknowledge that. And I think that's the wonderful thing about this conference is we get to again see more of a 360-degree view, like you said, looking at a leopard through a hole in the wall. That's part of the view of this conference, is to stop looking at the leopard through the hole in the walls. We just get one spot, and we can see, hey, like, yes, these are Chinese arts, these are Taoist arts, but this group of people saw them one way and this group of people saw them a different way. Just quickly before we sign off, I'll give you a little rundown, because I want people to be prepared for tomorrow at 9 Eastern. Tomorrow we'll give a little introduction again at 9:15. Angelica Davis is talking about living the virtues from refining emotions, 5-element or 5-phase theory applied to daily life, which is going to be a really cool traditional Chinese medicine approach to, how do you heal yourself? How do you live in harmony with these phases, these elements at home? Henry McCann is going to be talking about tongues, acupuncture, and distal point needling, understanding connection and resonance. A lot of this connection and resonance is based off of the Bagua and the I Ching. And so we're going to have a lot of commonality with some of these other presentations that we've had so far. Dali Yang, we're really excited to have some of her medieval Chinese therapeutic exercises. So the Daoyin, she recently did a big Daoyin project and translating an ancient book, I think from Sui Dynasty. And she is, an expert on this. So this is a wonderful opportunity, and we're going to get up and move as well. And then Master Zhou, we're going to talk about divination and traditional Chinese medicine once again from your perspective. So we're really excited for these talks. We really appreciate everyone that's come through. If you stayed for the entire day, you're a rock star, because you've given a full day to invest in yourself and your education and be part of our community. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern.
Okay.